Hi. Hello. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our wonderful little fun time. I'm your friendly neighborhood Prax. This is the channel, Prax Gorthasmephoria, and we are here for Inside the RPers studio. I'm going to introduce everyone as we are going to have a little fun tonight, talking mechanics, backstory, secrets, rumors, drama, tea, things that were never discovered, things that were possibly discovered and ignored, all the good juicy bits. But I'm not in charge of this event tonight. Well, let me phrase that. I'm just here to facilitate the event, and someone else is in charge of asking all the important questions. There is indeed a pope in charge of these questions. So we're going to go around. You will notice that we are short a trooper. We will miss Trooper, but he had an invitation to go see a live theater production, and we're like, bye. Tell us how it went. come back with details. But we will go around, and we'll start with on my right on the overlay, Alyssa. Hi, thank you for coming.
I had to think which way was right. Am I an adult yet? I don't know which way is my left and my right.
I don't know. All I can think about is,
I literally just do this and hope that it suffices because it's pointing both directions. And yes, I
works.
know about the L trick, but they both look like L's to me, so thanks, everybody. Hi!
Hi! How's yous?
Confused as always, but that's fine. That's fine. How are you? I guess it's also our last tea time all together, huh?
It is. It is the last day for tea.
It's fine. It's
So
fine. Tonight's tea is pretty... It's a generic sleepy time tea from a brand I've already forgotten the name of. It's pretty good.
Okay.
I forgot the name.
I like that brand. It's a good brand.
It's a good brand.
Yes.
I mean, I'm staying on point and just sticking with my constant comment, hashtag not sponsored by Big Low Teas, but...
One day.
One day.
Yeah.
One day.
We are available.
We are available. Hey, Anina. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. You ready for this?
Sure.
The sounds of enthusiasm. Do we have a tea tonight?
I am drinking Japanese green tea. Gin matcha.
See? High-end, fancy peoples. But then, we thank you for being here. Thank you for coming. Hey, Jim.
Hello.
So, I'm going to shamelessly steal this from Alyssa backstage. Which Jim are we getting tonight?
Hang on, let me check. Did you want it? No, okay. No, it's just me. It's just going to be me tonight.
Oh, well, we appreciate you being here.
Oh.
I'm not clear on which one that is,
already.
but we'll figure it out as we go.
That's fair. That's fair.
And tonight...
Over under on Jim talking to Jim while talking to Jim.
Do we want to talk to... do you want to... No, okay, we're good. No, it's all right. I don't know which one of me is over there or why I picked there as the direction, but apparently that's it. Tonight's tea is there's an otter on it. We loves it. And we're back to Earl Grey for me. Just your standard thingy.
Yes, the Earl and his obsession with bergamot for some reason. And last, but certainly not least, the gentleman of the hour, the hostess with the mostest. Hey, Pope, thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you for having me. Hey, everybody. Pope here. Pope World Bill on Twitter, Pope World Bill on Twitch. I lurk in all your streams and will cue all your A's. And as it is my first time for tea in drama, we're going with a strong mix because I have to keep up with these witty motherfuckers. And so I even wrote notes. This mix is a mix of black tea, cinnamon, ginger, licorice root, cardamom, clove, a little bit of black pepper, and finished with a dash of heavy cream.
Someone's in a spicy mood. I feel like
Well,
there might be spicy, juicy bits.
again, I need to be on my toes and quite aware. Speaking of aware, if you have questions in chat, please ask them. If you can, please highlight them to make them easier for me to find. I am old and going blind, so take pity on the old man. All right. With that being said, we have a lot to talk about. As with the regiment, 10 episodes, close to 40 hours of story in those 10 episodes. If you've got a winter break, they've got something for you. So by all means, dig in. But considering that you're already here, I think you may have already. With that being said, let's get into some of the juicy bits that I always dwell on. This show, The Regiment, is a period piece using a custom mashup of the Sword Chronicle and Good Society rules. So we're dealing with a lot of intricacies here. And since a lot of this art form is so much improvised, I want to go around and talk to each of you about what preparations that you put in before the show even went live. Because again, like so much of what we've seen, so much people don't necessarily realize is almost everything is spur of the moment. But for those teensy bits, or in some cases, looking at you, Prax, extensive framework, it's nice to know what went in. So going around, Alyssa, could you tell us a bit about your preparation for this show and for bringing us our good captain?
Yeah. So one of the things that helps is that Prax comes in with lots of references that you can pull out of. So, giving us like a time period and just being like, here's a bunch of Wikipedia pages as your starting point. Now, off you go, off you pop. So I started with a lot of that. There were a lot of rabbit holes I wound myself in. With the good captain, something that had come up for me is that I had just heard some other, I don't even remember what it was, but it was some interview with some other role player who said that there's always this thing that happens with experienced players. Like the longer they play, the less they make like the epic hero character, and the more they're like, I'm going to make the middling, boring guy. And it was like, I kind of want to see how that would go. And so then I kind of fell into this hole of like, I'm just going to yes and my way into this medium, like just not great at good at some things, mostly mediocre all around, and just sort of let him grow into things instead of like going ahead of time. But I did a lot of like very specific period research of like, okay, what would have been, like the art movements at the time, and like actually doing a lot of background research on the war, because so many of like for me, like frame of reference of that war has been like lost to my memory in school until it was like, this is what we're doing and this is the period we're in. And so I found myself just rereading battles and like trying to like get a sense of like, okay, where was Britain in all of this, and who actually started this, and what did the French do here? And then as soon as like the hook came out, then it's like, oh, by the way, these there's some rebels in the background. And as my best friend, who's probably not in the chat but was following along, and he would text me every so often, filthy papists came back out. Like I was just gonna text like, the filthy papists. I had to go back and do like all these research on the Hanoverians and everything, and I just found myself going into these Wikipedia rabbit holes to feel like I had a better sense of things. So my search history has become this weird hellscape of like all of my normal rabbit holes as a person, of like, what is this thing, to like, specific, dress trends in 1809, and also like makes of pistols, rifles, muskets, and other weapons available in 1809. So FBI, don't come for me, please. I'm just a nerd asking questions.
Well, but before we move over to Jim, I just, since you brought up these wonderful lore holes, what's the strangest thing that you researched before the show went live?
Before the show went live, I think the weirdest, it wasn't actually before the show went live. The strangest thing was I got down into a rabbit hole thanks to Trooper all about whist. And I came out of the other side of that rabbit hole at 3 a.m, just knowing so much about like card games up to that point. It's all sadly been lost now to time in my brain, but I definitely found myself like going down these rabbit holes of like, well, what did dice look like back then, and what were card games and things like that. And it just it was a very interesting, like, I don't think I ever got to use it. I certainly didn't get to gamble in the game, but I definitely like had a bit where it was like, ooh, gambling, what was that like?
Oh yes, it is a deep pit. I have Jim to thank for my trip down that hole for Deadlands, and finding out, what were the games at the time, what were the rules at the time.
So many of the rules were just like, it's like, huh.
Well, some games were incredibly simple, and then you had these like intricate games where certain suits are worth certain points, and you're trying to get a trick or avoid a trick. It's mind-boggling and fascinating. So again, winter break, if you've got something interesting, look up card games. So Jim, my friend, what sort of preparations did you do before the show went live?
Oh dear. Well, yeah, there were some rabbit holes that I ended up going down. The interesting thing, I think, that after I kind of sort of figured out the concept for the character, which was a conversation in and of itself, because it was the idea basically I'd initially pitched after I figured it out, after we had a sort of a session 0. What I said to Prax was that it's kind of, I'm inspired to a certain extent by the Scarlet Pimpernel, but he's not the Scarlet Pimpernel. His wife is the Scarlet Pimpernel. And he runs interference for her. That's basically sort of the deal. I already actually had a little bit of that I learned about, a little bit about sort of pre-1700s British intelligence, how things sort of were working before they formalized things, and I kind of extrapolated because I had I recommend this book, The Reckoning by Charles Nicholl. It's about the murder of Christopher Marlowe, who apparently was a secret agent of sorts, but so I had sort of a framework in my head for kind of how that sort of worked, and the idea was that sort of his wife was a spy. But for Spalding himself, I actually took sort of the eras of his life from Sword Chronicle. That you do a background thing in it, where you have these different build up points in your life, and so I figured out so he'd had so initially he was basically he was a fop for a while, because he'd fallen in love with someone who had spurned him very, very early. His fiance had gone off and married somebody else, and so he was very bitter and sort of threw himself into shallow things. And then he ended up in an arranged marriage with Eleanor, who turned out to be very interesting. and they actually sort of, they complement each other. But so he already had all this knowledge about clothing and light things and stuff that he didn't care so much about, even while he had been, even though he'd always had the he'd been getting, working on becoming a doctor throughout the whole thing because his father had gotten really sick when he was young, that kind of deal. But he finally had started to sort of realize, wait, no, I can actually, it's okay for me to try to do this and take care of people. And we have, and perhaps the world isn't terrible. So the things that then I sort of got into was he maintained this facade with the clothing and everything, his obsession with it, because it helped him be able to cover for his wife in what he was doing. Plus, he also, he had his own job. So I ended up diving down the rabbit hole of sort of Napoleonic era, Regency era clothing to an extent. And looking up different resources that I could find, different points on, what the fashions were in London and who the primary movers and shakers of them were, where to buy clothes, that kind of deal, is something that I had never really gotten into before. I learned how to tie a cravat, at least very basically. I'm no genius at it, but I can do it now without looking at the reference. And sort of figured out just how those things worked. And I already had like costume pieces and a few other costume pieces I ordered. And I don't know if you want to get into all that, but
we will. We'll get to the costumes a bit later. But
there was a certain degree of, shall we say, inspiration to dig into that somewhat from seeing just Trooper sent us this picture of him having in this jacket he had ordered, which you saw on the show, and I was like, damn it. I was hoping that I wouldn't get that bug, but here it is.
By all means, he's not here to defend himself. Pile on.
Yes, it's all Trooper's fault that I suddenly wanted all these costume pieces to.
I would like to interject a small note here, since he's not here to do it himself, and we know that he would if he was. When I pitched this idea to Trooper, early, because we had one of our wonderful sessions of talking till 4 o'clock in the morning, after a Witcher game, and I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing, what do you think? And he goes, okay, and you can just watch his eyes turn to look at the other monitor. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm buying a jacket, it's fine. I'm like, great, we haven't gotten anything else done, nothing of the book is done, but Trooper's buying costume pieces. This is gonna happen.
So what I'm hearing is that Spaulding was the fop in game, Trooper was the fop out of game.
Correct.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
I'll confirm, and Trooper can fight me on it later.
Did you see that shawl, man? He just had it on hand.
So to go with my follow-up, Jim, what was the strangest thing over the course that you researched?
Oh man. I think sometimes things got a little specific. Or I was sitting there trying to figure out. Yeah, I was trying to look up lace patterns at one point. I was because that became very important suddenly. I mean, it's the whole thing just with I think just the whole thing with the clothes is how to tie a cravat. I ended up pulling it. There's a bunch of stuff I didn't end up using. I have yet to read the Wikipedia entry fully on Beau Brummel. I read some of it, but that was a big deal. There was I found, and unfortunately I no longer have it because I closed the tab, and sadly, my ADHD does not allow me to preserve these things in a way that in an organized filing system. But there was a point. I think I found somebody's series of fictional books, and they have this site up somewhere on their website for this, I think, Regency era book series that they've put out. They have clothing terms basically from A to Z glossary of clothing terms that I went in and started looking at, and so there are a bunch of those that I ended up not using nearly as much as I thought I was. I ended up using the names that I found and the city areas more than I thought I would, but it was nuts. I had to look that up for London and also for Paris. When we had Simon in, and sort of like, wait, no, I got to figure out where his clothes came from. Quick, let me see where they bought clothes in Paris in the 17 and 1800s.
Delightful. Nino.
Yes.
Good sir. So what sort of preparation went into your research as well as the creation of Cleveland Griffiths?
So I might as well come clean. There was absolutely no preparation or research that I did whatsoever for this game. And I'm embarrassed to say that it really showed, because I really felt like I struggled through pretty much the entire campaign. I think the only knowledge that I had going in was basically all the horse veterinary knowledge that I had picked up when I was dating a horse veterinarian. And then that never actually came up at all in anything. So to play it safe, like Cleveland, I sort of just came up with because I felt that I could, if I was completely lost, I could just pass that off as a pretty much his thing, and not caring about society and propriety in general. And so that was going okay. And then I had to play some other characters. And then that's kind of where I felt things sort of fell apart for me there, because I couldn't fake as much at that point. So I was really pretty disappointed in myself for not putting in more work into it, given how much real world distractions that I had throughout the past couple of months. But yeah, that's pretty much where I was for most of the game. Just completely being reactionary, not really driving any sort of real plot narrative and such. Case in point, believe it or not, I didn't plan on Cleveland dying until he got stabbed. And at that point, I was like, I feel like death would be merciful at this point, both for me as the person who's playing the character, and the fact that, I feel like it was cathartic in the sense that I feel like my life is probably going to trend towards that end. And I will probably die without any meaningful connections or relationships and such. And so, I felt like that was sort of my way of working through those feelings as a rehearsal, I guess. So, as far as this deepest research or things that I had looked up, I think the only thing that I looked up was the farrier costumes, just because everybody else was also, gearing up in that sense. And I thought that,
I hear where you're from is really nice too.
maybe it would help me a little bit more if I bought something to wear, but I couldn't find anything that I could afford, given that I was unemployed for most of the campaign. So, yeah, so that's where I was.
2020 has a mood, ladies and gentlemen. Flying by the seat of our pants. But let it be said that there was, with both Cleveland, Pomeroy, there were very intense and as well as delightfully comedic moments. So don't sell yourself short. Plus, death is always interesting. Not always good, but it's always interesting.
Yeah, I was trying to go for the trifecta and see if I could get all three of my characters killed at that point. But then, there was only 45 minutes left, and I wasn't sure how I could pull that off in a complete manner. And that would have been sort of my, you know what, that's just how it should go. Because
well, later on with some of the questions I have, you might be able to, in this postscript, go 3 for 3, but we're not there yet. Prax.
Yes.
So I'm looking at the clock now as a mild stand-in for all of Troopers Discord. As I open to ask you this question, how much research did you do in preparation for this campaign?
Define before this campaign.
Before the campaign went live.
Define before the campaign went live.
Research for this specific game.
Okay. Not as much as people may think. Part of that is because, I researched a couple things and I kind of tweaked some things, and there was very character-driven portions. And Coldrake is right. Prax is always researching. In this particular instance, a lot of it was based on previous knowledge and things that I had already researched. For those of you who may not be aware of this, Prax is a great lover of a particular author, Bernard Cornwell, and a series of books starring a particular not gentleman officer, Richard Sharp. If you have not read them, go read them. They are wonderful. They are great books. They're really, really intriguing, well-researched. Bernard Cornwell is a fabulous author. He writes adventure really well, but he also writes historical fiction very well. This was a point in which I and Trooper and a couple other people were talking about what is the difference. We were talking about his Colas, City of Light and Shadow campaign and this, and what is the difference between historical fiction and alternate history. And I said, well, for me, historical fiction is the events occur within the timeline of history as we know it to be, without changing major events. So the Regiment is historical fiction. City of Light and Shadows, spoilers for last night's finale, has definitely gone full alternate history at this point, because the players have done things that have caused certain people who were not dead in August of 1941 to be very, very dead. Just gonna leave that there. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's very good. But the Sharp series is a alternate, or is not an alternate history. It's historical fiction. The people, Richard Sharp and the characters of his unit are fictional, but the people that he's interacting are all historical. All of the events of the battles are well researched. The progression of the battle doesn't change. The progression of the Peninsular Campaign doesn't change. All of that kind of stays the same. You're just focusing through the lens of Richard Sharp and his friends and complicated relationships. But I was exposed to these books very early on because my dad loved history, military history, these kind of things, fiction, all of these things. And then in the 90s, PBS started airing the BBC series films of these books starring Sean Bean. It is these films that guarantee that Sean Bean does not have the worst death record for fictional characters. Because they just skew his results. 16 movies, Sean Bean lives. That from the beginning of the Peninsular Campaign all the way up to Waterloo, and then a couple flashback episodes, and then a couple films that go all the way back to Richard's origins in the campaign in India. And so I had done a lot of research when I started reading these books and was very interested in them, and, you know, like, when you're a kid and it's kind of really cool and you're reading about Patrick Harper, who is the sergeant for Richard Sharp, and he's describing the Baker 7 barrel and how he's the only guy on the battlefield who can wield one and how the British don't use them anymore, and you're like, wait, what's that? And you go, oh, it's a rifle that fires seven balls at a time, and which they didn't keep using it because it would shatter, because, like, the recoil would literally shatter guys' arms. You're like, that's cool. Can I have one? Okay, no. But, like, so I did a lot of research about that. When I started this idea, if we want to talk about what I actually researched for this campaign, I went deep dived. I actually created a hack for Sword Chronicle, and I was like, okay, we need to start at the beginning, which means we need to actually create the regiment that the players will be engaging with, which means, hi, I have to create all of the tables to roll on. So I need to know, how am I going to define all of these regiments? What are the breakdown of the regiments? What are we going to use? What we're actually involved, you know, which types of regiments were involved in the peninsular campaigns, because we don't want to go, we're not going off to Egypt, we're not going off to India at the moment, we're focused here in Spain and Portugal. You know, I don't want to start bringing in different things that would get overly complicated. So then I went down that rabbit hole of, like, figuring that out. Spent a lot of time doing the math and trying to figure out exactly what the percentage breakdown of the number of officers for a regiment would be. It's kind of complicated, and I freely acknowledge that my numbers are slightly skewed because the only things available are the accounts based on the Battle of Waterloo, which is technically 6 years later. And so things may have changed, they may not have, but that's the information I was basing it on.
Okay. Quick follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
So as I talk and do more interviews with more storytellers, this theme of the love letter comes up regularly, as you've just explained the Sharp series. Is this your love letter to that series?
I would say yes. This is my love letter to Sharp. I mean, I tried really, really hard, and for those of you who may have watched the series, there was a gentleman in this series, one of everyone's favorite NPCs, called Major Atkins. And I tried really hard. Like, I always put Easter eggs in all of my games. And, like, I was like, I'm going to make it's like, okay, he is not an Easter egg. He is straight up, the Major from the first couple Sharp books. Sharp's Rifles, Sharp's Eagle, Sharp's Company. Technically, Sharp's Eagle is the first written book, and Sharp's Rifles is a flashback published after, but it comes chronologically earlier, with Major Hogan. And I was playing the character, and I was going to start doing something very interesting with this character of the Major, who is a exploring officer, who is one of the most interesting things in history of, like, why does this exist kind of things. Because British Army is the answer, because you can't just have a guy wandering around behind enemy lines because he'll get hung for a spy, but if he's behind enemy lines in full uniform, well, he can't get hung as a spy, because then he's just an officer. And you're like, who were these people and how crazy were they? Apparently very. But in the Sharp series, this character is Major Hogan. He kind of doubles as, like, a spy master, which is where Atkins kind of came in. And I was, like, trying to create this character separately, and then, you know, the voice, it just couldn't work because Brian Cox is sitting in my head as Major Hogan going, no, I'm here. What do you mean I'm not here? Move out of my way. This is my stage. I'm going to be on it. So yes, this is definitely my letter to the Sharp series, and it was a wonderful time to have with the friends who enjoyed it with me.
can I just mention briefly that on a personal note that Major Atkins and the Brian Cox of it all was such an imprint that it ended up carrying over into a game that a home game I was playing on Wednesday nights, where I was playing a character in a Call of Cthulhu home game. It was and I was trying to decide, okay, well, where's this professor from? We'll make it, this archaeologist is an Irishman. We'll make him that. Oh no. It just sort of bled into that as well. So your reach has extended way beyond this game.
Blame Brian Cox in that perfect portrayal.
All right. So, on the note of Cox,
Which
Alyssa,
kind?
Yes.
hi. We're getting into one of my favorite questions, which is relationships. Relationships drive story. So I just want to know, how much did you conspire with Prax in the creation of Bisley's wonderful wife?
So here's the thing. All I gave Prax was that I wanted it to be a very, like, in the painted veil, where it was like, it's an arranged marriage. She's been cheating on him. And he's like, no, we're going to make this work. So you are coming with me on this campaign and we're going to figure this out. It's like, I'm going to put everything into your hands. And I just gave whatever details I had in my head between session 0 and when we started playing. And I was like, have fun. And as it became more and more clear that the goal of trying to save a doomed marriage wasn't going to happen, it was like, well, I suppose this is the darkest timeline, Bisley, and this is where he would go with it. Just let it go dark and see where it goes. But I let Prax just, it's like, okay, here is a toy, give me the consequence. And boy, did we get it.
Not just
Everybody.
you. Everybody.
So many people got stabbed. I mean, to Coldrake's point, I know better to give GM ammunition. I just also wanted to. I in real life was just like, well, what if chaos, and was just gonna let it happen.
Yeah, I was getting flashbacks to Vampire and those characters and those choices.
They were always chaos.
with
there was no rhyme or reason to the vampire characters. They went for whatever the most chaotic option was, which was kind of not where Bisley was supposed to go. Bisley was meant to be pretty stuffed up in a lot of ways, trying to fit into a society box that he didn't fit into. Like, that was the whole bit with him, was that he didn't, he was a middle manager, as it were, like in the middle line of officers where his commission had been bought. He was a middle son. He's just like mediocre in so many of the things that were expected of him to be. So him coming out in the darkest timeline version was kind of a benefit in a lot of ways. It just gave me a lot more to do. And more of the Prax consequences, TM.
Yeah. Well, again, speaking of stabbings, we go over to Jim and our good Dr. Spaulding. I again, one of my big interests is in the collaborative process, especially in this art form. How much input did you have when it comes to the creation of Spaulding's dearest, as it were?
Prax was great about yes-anding me on that. So it sort of was something that was springing from the initial sort of as the whole thing was being woven together. She asked us for rumors for our characters, and we had to do like one that's mostly true, one that's maybe true, and one that's likely false. And the mostly true rumor that I sent to her was Fletcher did not bring his wife with him to Spain, but he's been seeing a woman in secret here in Talavera. And the truth was his wife is the woman he's seeing in secret. She went to Spain incognito because she's an intelligence operative working for the crown and has been tasked to root out spies in the area. And sort of after that, there was a point where Prax very kindly got on a call with me and helped me build my character. And during that conversation, it was sort of where the Scarlet Pimpernel thing came up. And I think we sort of established sometime between then and starting that he would be able to make sort of through like a dead drop, he would be able to communicate with her, like send her letters and stuff. And you know, they'd be able to communicate with each other sort of a couple of different ways. And we knew that basically he was seeing her at night. And that what eventually happened was that there would it happened a few times in game. I would provide a certain extent of input of things that I think it would be nice if she would would help out with, but it was entirely up to Prax how she wanted to interpret it by these letters that Spalding would send to Eleanor. I actually wrote the letters. I kind of wrote them in this sort of calf code that I send them, and I sent them to Prax, and I called them love letters because they were both, you know, information and love letters, as sort of the way that I put them together, and that was a certain degree of input, but you know what she decided to do with them was entirely up to her.
Delightful. Nino, with the good Griffiths, I know you didn't do much prep, but there was something very specific with Griffith's story, and that was his relationship with his good sister. How much of a collaborative effort and how much was kind of the ball in your court as to the establishment of her relationship, her personality?
It was basically a name and a couple of sentences, and then basically everything else was Trooper in that regards. That first intrigue was really, really rough, because that's when I realized that I did not create a character that I felt was supposed to be viable at what I wanted him to do. I kind of made him more of a generalist, trying to prepare for everything, and then I found that he was pretty much inadequate when it came to battle, as well as the intrigue and conversation parts of things. So I feel like the only reason why he had any remote success with regards to that was because the two characters that he was paired up with the most in terms of navigating through society were actually even worse than he was at that. So yeah.
Well, I mean, we again, don't sell yourself short, because we had that beautiful and terrifying moment back gambling, where you were guiding everybody through what, again, these were like children to the slaughterhouse when it came to having fun, cutting loose, being an officer, being a little naughty, and having fun. Like we got to see almost like the older frat brother that was Cleveland guiding these guys along, and then the unfortunate calling out, which as soon as that happened, and the insinuation, like, as I've never played Good Society, but as someone who's watched a number of those, let alone the intrigue bombs and twists and turns of Sword Chronicle. Like, everything just kind of went tight for a second. The eyes went wide as the record scratched, and
Yeah.
that was a beautiful moment, and I don't think that would have happened without you.
I felt like that moment was more of me using that resolve token to bring in the Colonel, and just the way that the Colonel was sort of placed in a number of scenes prior to that moment. Like the most notable one that I remembered was him standing outside of the tavern watching Dr. Spaulding go off on a secret liaison. So I felt like that was probably the major point of that. Yeah. And then I felt like the other person, it was another character too that sort of helped out Alyssa's character, Pomeroy, when they managed to find themselves in the living room.
Yeah, that's a good point to transition to. Prax, did you always intend for everyone to be playing multiple characters, or did that just kind of happen?
So, when I originally thought of this game, it was just after Good Society had come out. And I was like, this is really cool. It's telling Regency stories. And, like, I kind of like Jane Austen, but my Regency stories are much more blood, mud, and trouncing French. And I was like, okay, so can I do what I want with Good Society? No, not really. And then the SRD for Sword Chronicle was released, and I was like, ooh, I could do that with this. But I also like the idea of having everyone play multiple characters. Taking the resolve token, monologue tokens from mechanics from Good Society, putting that together with there's a phase in Good Society where they talk about rumors, and there's rumors that are written, and then there's rumors that are spread, and how this kind of influences everything. I was like, I'm probably not going to spread any of those or have that kind of moment out of it during play that might step away from, the immersion. But I want to have that kind of moment where there's like, oh, there is a society that exists within this regiment. What are the rumors that everybody knows? What are things that they may or may not? We're not going to, I was the only one who knew every rumor and what they were all true or not, but everyone had access to the full list of rumors and what they all were. I took things that were kind of there, was like, let's use these. And then as things happened in the game, I would use those events to influence the way NPCs would react to the other players. But yes, okay. I had fully intended to have people play more than one character. Anino just ended up playing 3 because we decided that I told the players when we were creating this in session 0, when we in Sword Chronicle you build your house. Well, in this we were building the regiment, and no one wanted to be the colonel. And I'm like, okay, guys, can one of you just take the colonel as an NPC character? We don't have to make him a big deal, but I feel that, as he is such a major powerhouse in the regiment itself, you guys should have control over that rather than me. I mean, I'm gonna be Sir Arthur Wellesley, so I already have ultimate control over you and possibly Whitehorse and all of that stuff that's over here. But like within the regiment itself, the authority figure should be like in Sword Chronicle, like the head of house should be a player rather than just a GM NPC. So that's kind of what I did. And so Anino stepped up to pick him up as an NPC, and then everyone had to have an NPC that was related to someone else. Ended up being that Anino also picked up Pomeroy to tie in with Bisley. and just the way things worked out.
Okay. So we now are sort of seeing, as we were slowly pulling back the curtain, how things fell into place. Okay. Now, what sort of secrets, scandals, spice got left out of the cake? This is something that always happens, because especially when you have session zeros and in the course of the campaign, there's little threads that everyone has that usually get cut. So I want to know what sort of stuff ended up on the cutting room floor. So Alyssa, what sort of like secrets or scandals that you had possibly brewing didn't make it in or didn't get revealed over the course of the story?
I think the biggest one had been, so much of this character had been that longing to fix things with his wife, that like so many of like the small periphery backstory things never needed to get used, because the big one, like it was essentially like the big gun came out with Bisley. So there was in the backstory I had created in my head for him, like because he was like where Pomeroy came from is that they're childhood friends. Like they had been friends forever, and Bisley was always the disappointing son of the three. The youngest son went into the church. The oldest one is the perfect upstanding brother that like his dad expected, and he's this sort of sad art boy. Like I think that was the thing, was in the background is Bisley's really like, not just that he would have been better in an artillery role because he really had all of his skill shooting things. It was that he was sort of meant to be like this. If he were alive today, he would be a soft boy artist type, like absolutely just like trash little artist boy on the internet posting his sad emo lyrics. Like that would have been Bisley. So having to sort of like, it's not like it wasn't there, it just wasn't always foreground material. And I got to like, the biggest thing that came out about him, that his wife was cheating and doing whatever she was, which turns out she was just sort of plotting for rebels to come and kill everybody and cause problems that way instead. I mean, that was sort of the big guns, as it were. So I didn't have as many, I feel like, periphery things that, or at least I didn't feel a sadness for it. I know that there was a thing we had come up with as the regiment as the whole, was the concept of the O'Malley, and I don't think we ever touched that in game.
We talked
maybe
about it a little bit,
but I don't think we ever really got that into it. But I can't
Yeah.
remember if we did. I think that was the thing I was thinking.
We
I was like,
referenced it exactly once.
Yeah.
When we were talking about Quibble, I think, and we just said,
think so.
"Oh, he's okay, but he's no O'Malley." And then
Yeah, we never really got into what that meant, I think, and it was just like a one-off. Oh, it's like a one-off bit that like the scene got cut, so nobody knew what it meant. But I think that was about it, really.
For Cleveland, I had this idea that was basically Three's Company-ish, where Cleveland was supposed to be sleeping around with a lot of the officers' wives. And his cover was actually provided by Dr. Spalding, who said that Cleveland had some sort of exotic disease that wouldn't allow him to actually, have intimate relationships with people. And that was his cover. So no one would ever really suspect that he was, in fact, being the counterpart to Mrs. Bisley. But that never really took off. I think I think Priscilla kind of changed the whole tone of where Cleveland was going story-wise. So that was a whole other dramatic angle, or juicy, gossipy kind of angle that never really got to explore.
Very interesting. Jim, what tidbits do you have for us?
Oh yeah, I kept hoping to bring that one up at different points, but there were a lot of times where it was like, by the time I would think of it, it was already past. The windows weren't big where they were there, and there was already stuff happening. So I was like, where I wanted to kind of insert that. But yeah, that was definitely something I wanted to do. As far as for Spaulding's stuff, we hit most of the major points. I think we didn't really. There were some things that were sort of hinted at and not explored. Where, like, for example, when he was going out at night into town, it was implied but not really fully explained that he was going and doing doctor's calls on the locals. Basically, he was going out and making house calls for people not in the regiment, just people who lived there, to try to just do more stuff, actually do stuff for the community that they were currently inhabiting. That kind of gig. So I mean, we didn't really explore that very much, and I think there was a thread that just sort of didn't go many places. There was. I mean, the rest of it is sort of like, no plan survives contact with anyone. So it's hard to say. There was a rumor about Spaulding being running a gambling ring that we never really got into, which was absolutely untrue. It was just basically he occasionally gambled, but people were trying to figure out who it was, and they didn't, so suspicion kept landing on Spaulding for it, even though he didn't really have much to do with it, aside from occasionally he would make bets. Although he was going to try to use that to, there was a little plan I had in the back of my head to try to get information out of Ingram over a game of whist that never happened, because a bunch of other stuff happened at the same time. Where he was going to try to. That was part of the reason I was looking up that whole thing about Anne Margaret Lancaster, who had, like, this was a real person, by the way. The people that Spaulding kept talking about, his friends, in fashion. These are real names I pulled from history. But Anne Margaret Lancaster had agents in Paris during the wars with Napoleon, who would get fashion information back to her, so she could publish it in her magazine. It was Anne Margaret Lancaster and Marianne Bell. Actually, no, it was Marianne Bell who had the agent in Paris. Anne Margaret Lancaster did not. She had to do stuff on her own. More, but yeah. So Marianne Bell, I was gonna use that as a way to, like, an introduction to a conversation with Ingram about, by the way, my friend is having a little difficulty getting the materials she needs for the designs that she has. And so, that kind of deal. So that never materialized because other stuff happened. And of course, and I didn't know whether or not the letters were going to get read out loud at any point. Because I sort of had imagined that perhaps someone would find the letter and read it and try to figure out what it meant, but that didn't happen either.
Well, now's your moment.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if you noticed, but we were not a super aware crew.
Yeah, there were many checks, and there were many not so great rolls.
Yeah,
this is true. Yeah, if you like, if you'll beg my indulgence, I'll
by all means.
If I may beg your indulgence, it's the other way around. If I may beg your indulgence on this, you see, it's all slipping away now that I'm no longer playing the game. But this was the first letter was the slightly longer one. It was after the hospital tent burned. And so he starts out, "My dearest Dove, I fear someone may have you in their sights," because she had been in there that morning. "If you've not heard already, someone placed a keg of our favorite instrument of haphazard expedition in the SA, Scandal Alcove, not long after our parting, with suitably meteoric results. I am all right, as are my charges, though the wardrobe containing all 5 of the fleets, outfits from Fleet Street, sadly had to give its life in the service of delaying the conflagration. A few of us shall be perusing the matter. There has also recently been a rash of overeager steed-based capitalism that may or may not be connected." This is referring to the horses business with the horses being taken. Should you know of any villains who might be about, I would be most grateful for anything you might be able to share regarding them, though I understand the difficulties under which you labor. I shall be attending the upcoming function at the habitat of our aristocratic friend in the interest of pursuing the matter. Above all else, I desire your safety and plead that you take great care, my darling. I know what little good such a request may likely yield, but there it is nonetheless. I long for the day this whole damnable business is done soon, so we may cease skulking about and return to each other's arms. Yours eternally, Sawbones. And that was the first. Do you want to hear the second one?
Again, this is the airing of the secrets. I need this. Give it to me.
Okay, the second one.
Wait, before you read the second one, can we just all pause and just applaud Jim for the phrase overactive steed-based capitalism? I've never heard a better description of horse thievery in my life, and I love it so much.
Yeah, I had these couple of layers that I had to deal with. I by the way, just so folks know, I had a thesaurus open always when I was playing this character, because the man is a thesaurus, basically.
Is a thesaurus that wears high fashion.
Yes, exactly. He's a well-dressed thesaurus.
For future reference, next time you're running Deadlands, that phrase about horse thievery needs to appear.
Overeager steed-based capitalism. Yeah.
Yes.
I shall try to remember. Yeah, no, it is one of those things, and of course, Gus Spalding does this because he developed this habit when he was being a socialite, and then he just leaned into it when he found out his wife was a spy, because it's like, this is the best possible way to obscure what my real meaning is. So he kind of did that. So the second letter happened. I think it was after. Yes, this was. I think yes, this was after the night at the soiree.
It was the night after the soiree. It was actually sent after the second destruction. The Hanoverians. A couple of these Jacobites came in and knocked out the guards, and you had a whole bunch of people in your tent that were bleeding from various causes.
Yeah,
something quite common as the campaign progressed.
It was that morning when I was still going to be when before the plans changed and we had another attack. It was that morning after, and let me see. I actually even specified a translation on some of it because that will make it easier. So yeah. So this one shorter letter: Dearest Dove, it seems there may be a connection with peers of a northerly bent. In this case, this was after the Scottish connection had been discovered. It also appears that the gem of Catalonia is purveying lace accoutrements while receiving multi-legged friends under the auspices of the Willow, the Peacock, and the Continental Executive. In this case, of course, the gem of Catalonia is Barcelona. The Willow is Ingram. The Peacock is Mrs. Bisley, and the Continental Executive is a French officer, basically. Our multi-legged friends. That's the thing again. Back to the horses. There is potential to open discussion with the Magpie, however, and there shall be tea on the vestibule. That was when the tea was going to happen with Mrs. Quibble. If there should be an assignation coming to query such matters, I shall be delighted to accommodate it in that place or another convenient nook. In other words, if you would like to come and spy on us, this conversation, to help me evaluate what her deal is, please do so. And if you would like, we'll talk about it afterwards. Yours eternally, Sawbones. And then, of course, I had to change my plans immediately to tea is canceled, and I the last note that I sent.
Okay. Nino, any secrets that didn't get aired with your myriad menagerie of characters?
Yeah, so I mentioned to you about the whole Three's Company thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was that. No, I'll save that for the mini epilogues at the end.
Okay, excellent. So, Prax, as the holder of the Tome of Lore,
Mm-hmm.
what things didn't quite make it in?
A lot, because the characters went different places. So,
Yes.
So one of the things I always do is when I run a game, is I create worlds, general plot points, but more characters, NPCs that will live in the world, and quote unquote villains, which are usually more antagonists, unless, okay, well, no. In Go West, they were straight up villains because they were plotting to bring back Yig and destroy the world. But whatever. But they're usually antagonists, and they're living people, so they're doing things, and if the players don't choose to go on a certain path, then they're going to continue to do whatever they're doing, and things that will change. The world changes. It doesn't stay static. And so there could have been ways in which the player, like, I had prepped the Sword Chronicle war rules, but I had looked at those and went, this is really complicated and doesn't actually do what I want, which is to focus on the intimacy of the drama of these characters inside the framework of the war, but you might still have a battle. So I actually redid the war system when I hacked the system originally to create different stats for when you created the House Regiment, to create different stats that would be used as modifiers to dice rolls for different regiments. So I had like 4 French regiments sitting over here that never got touched, that I didn't have to worry about rolling against. They didn't end up going, like, for example, they didn't end up going out into confront the people that were attacking the villa. That didn't end up happening, so that didn't happen. There were a couple things that could have changed. One of the things I revealed to the players in the, like, aftermath of the last set of the finale, spoiler alert, although the rumor was, and the book purported, that Mary Elizabeth Bisley was sleeping around with everyone and his brother, she was not actually having affairs with any of them. It was just a very convenient excuse for her to plot treason. And her name was not Mary Elizabeth Bisley.
Yeah. So, well, Bisley got lucky on that end.
I just don't feel bad about her conclusion. I don't feel bad about it at all.
I don't think anyone really felt bad.
No, and in the end, I think it was exactly the comeuppance he needed anyway. Or even if it was that she was, not sleeping around, she was certainly having an affair with treason, and for king and country and all that. So I think he could justify it in his head.
An affair with treason, a story by a Captain Bisley.
I mean, is it treason if you don't believe the person sitting on the throne has any right to it, and that you have a stronger claim?
Well, Jacobite history is a tangled and interesting fetid web that one can walk along, and the many rebellions. Now, a question from chat, Prax.
Yes.
With all of your preparation, with how you were hacking, slashing, and pasting together these two systems, in your preparations, did you have to create character sheets, skills, and aspects from scratch? Or it was a lot of hack, put here, hack, put here?
Well, I didn't create character sheets from scratch because I can't do the coding for Roll20. And I'm not gonna.
Mood.
I'm like, So there are character sheets for A Song of Ice and Fire system, which was, when Green Ronin published this originally, it was A Song of Ice and Fire, and then they made it setting agnostic and turned it into a Sword Chronicle. So there are really good character sheets for that. So most of it we left the same. Some of that we changed, and we pulled, I pulled things out that you weren't gonna use, that didn't make sense, or I left things in, but I changed what they would have been tied to. For example, like marksmanship. Rather, if you look at the character sheet for Sword Chronicle or Song of Ice and Fire, it's bows, crossbows, siege weapons, and thrown weapons. So I was like, okay, well, we're just gonna keep it marksmanship, and it's muskets and pistols, rifles, siege weapon, because artillery does exist, and then thrown weapons, which are still going to be anything that you would throw. So that was easy to keep, in contained. I did have to do some modifications because most of the personal combat rules are based on your stats of athletics or dexterity, which don't apply if you have a gun, right? The gun is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how it does matter in how skilled you are when you get into things like rifles and versus muskets. That is a thing that kind of sits over here. But it doesn't matter your physical body, and because most of the damage is calculated in Sword Chronicle system based on what is your number of degrees of success of your attack. Time is times to your base stat of your athletics plus 3, basically. So if you had 2 degrees of success, if your athletics is 3, and so 3 and 3 is 6, times 2 is 12. That would be your base damage for a sword if you were slashing somebody. Okay, so what I did instead was, it's just a straight D4 for every 2d4 for every degree of 2d4 for 1 degree of success, and then an additional d4 for every additional degree of success for muskets and pistols. And then I changed it. Nobody actually used rifles, so if we had, it would have been d6s, but we didn't end up getting there. Siege weapons would have been really kind of fun, but nobody brought in major artillery. That's not true. I did bring in the exploding wardrobe, but that I did as fire damage, and concussive force damage and flying objects, and that was just, I pulled that off based on other things that I had, so yes.
Excellent.
There is a document that exists. It is currently an Excel spreadsheet that has 6 different sheets on this document for creating the house, creating characters, what things were kept, what things wouldn't be kept, and how things would have been changed.
Excellent.
Because tables.
Well, moving from tables to more tables, chairs, and rumor. One of the things that is a delight in you using Good Society is those monologue tokens. And one of the things that commonly becomes an occurrence as you watch folks, or you do play Good Society, is the mini game of ambushing people with those tokens. But also in this specific medium, there's usually a green room chat. So, were there conspiracies to use monologue tokens against certain people? I must know.
From my recollection, it was, unless things were happening between private chats between players, it was less conspiracy and more if you don't do it, I'm going to.
Yeah, that was what I was gonna say. I can think of a number of times where troopers I want to do this, and it's like, dude, if you don't, I will.
Okay, so it's the egging on. I see. Because
Yeah.
we got some really cool monologues over the course of those 10 episodes, of moments of just, a lot of times, just sheer frustration and anger. was the most common theme in those internal monologues. that we got was just, I hate existence or this one individual. So that leads me into the counters. How did those come about? And what is their current settings now that we have come to the end of the story?
Oh, you mean the Willoughby counter?
Yeah.
The Willoughby counter came out because, so one of the things that exists in the Sword Chronicle creation system, and is one of the, if you've played Vampire, old school Vampire, not V5, because it's weird. Also, I haven't looked at the new book yet, but apparently Ravnos have been recreated to more match the Salubri, and I'm a little weird on that, but we'll get back to that. It's the new V5.
I have thoughts. I have thoughts. Also, I'll give you some later.
Yeah, we'll come back. We'll do that. But if you played Vampire and you played, so like, thank you, Quentin. So for those of us who grew up playing TTRPGs in the 90s, you started with D&D. D&D is very kind of, second edition particularly, and then into third edition is kind of rather generic. It's very specialized in mechanics-based creation, but not in, like, the ideology of a character. But then you changed, and Vampire came out. And Vampire gave you a system mechanically within the game, flaws and benefits, to personalize your character in ways that gave you both great RP moments and then great things for a GM to be like, oh, I'm gonna torture the fuck out of you. It'll be great. So, Sword Chronicle has a similar system, which are benefits and detriments. You can spend destiny points to get more benefits, but you can also gain more benefits by investing in detriments, which just kind of makes sense. So Trooper invested in the detriment at character creation of a nemesis. And then he's like, I need a nemesis, and I'm going to do this, and he has to have, like, a punchable face. I'm like, don't worry, I've got this for you. And for those of you who are playing along at home, there is actually a command that, if I remember what the command is... There we go. This is a document I've started doing with all of the games that I run. It's a Google Slides. I find all of the face claims, and I make it a copy of the one that I have for my DM notes, which are just shorthand notes about, like, NPC characters as they come up. And this way I can just copy and paste into this and share this with my players so that they have like, this is what you as players know. And then there's a DM copy that has a whole bunch more secrets that you don't get to see. But he's like, I need my nemesis to be a nemesis. And I'm like, here you go. And I have a Pinterest that's kind of complicated and really is designed for just faces and characters and designs. And I pulled this particular individual to play Willoughby Ingram, and the first thing Trooper does is, I just want to punch him in the face. I'm like, that's going to be a thing now. So that's how and then in the first session, he starts cursing Willoughby out loud in himself, and I'm just like watching the cameras, watching him, and I'm like, I see every time you do it now. And he's like, but god damn it. So if you want to know what the current counter of where the Willoughby counter is at the moment, and I had to add one more because I didn't get to add it this week yet. So the total for Willoughby Ingram, for Lieutenant Valentine has cursed Willoughby Ingram 45 times over 10 episodes.
4.5 curses an episode. There you go, folks.
The head injury counter came after, like, that came late, like episode 7 or 8. I want to say. I feel like
it was after the soiree because everybody got a bunch of head injuries.
That feels right.
It was after the soiree, and the head injury counter. If I can remember my own commands, people. What is it? You know that time when you're like, I do a thing, and
Yeah,
I keep doing a thing, and
I know that feel.
oh,
Anyone who's been a mod has had that. What was the command?
12 head injuries. That was the
So
command.
12. The head injury counter was 12. So no, that is delightful note. And now we get to what is most likely my highlight of the evening, as we get into two questions. First question is, who survived the war? This is your chance to sort of like start going on a postscript.
Okay, so here's me being a pedantic person who spends an excessive amount of time researching the Peninsular Campaign. Are we talking the war as a whole? Or which war are we talking about? Are we talking about the first time Napoleon gets sent off to Elba, or are we talking all the way through Waterloo? Because that might change.
My question is, with of these characters, through all of it.
Okay, so through Waterloo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who lived? Who lived through the war? Or at least got to go home and live out their life?
Well, I rolled a D2 to determine if Bisley would have, and it rolled no. So, no, I did not survive. I imagine that he did fine for a while and, ignoring whatever my cat just threw on the floor, just in the course of battle, was a casualty, and that was it.
Follow-up question. Did Bisley at least get one moment of happiness before his death?
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to... Which one? There's one of the characters in Fire Emblem, they give him a whole thing where they're like, and he never got happiness or a date ever again. I would never do that to any of my characters. No, I think he found a way to be, like, comfortable. And, like, I imagine that him and Pomeroy just became, like, super good bros and everything worked out fine. And, Valentine was always good to him. So maybe that friendship, became even stronger as well. And, it just... War is hell, and unfortunately Bisley didn't survive. You're unmuted, Anino. But again, that's the most medium answer I could think of anyway for a medium man.
Fair.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because this is one thing that I never got a chance to throw in. But it was one of Pomeroy's secrets. It was that he was in love with Captain Bisley. It's so...
oh my God! Talk about the marriage of opposites right there.
So I was gonna try to throw in that at some point after the the divorce / annulment, whatever it was finalized or something, that's when I think Pomeroy would have confessed.
I mean, you didn't need the divorce or annulment anymore. You had the dead body.
Yeah, we had the dead body, but
that's an annulment.
Yeah.
Oh, it certainly was the end of that marriage. That's for sure.
Yeah. So that was lurking in the back there, that I was kind of waiting for the right moment to do that, but it never really shook out.
Oh man, I had no idea.
Well, did of the two remaining, did they survive the war, or did they both die, or one or the other?
I think that Bisley probably would have died first, and then Pomeroy would have died shortly after.
Okay.
I will say, we'll put a pin in Fisher because technically he's a little different.
Okay. But we're going to answer all these questions.
We are.
The good Dr. Spaulding and of course, our poor, not quite long suffering, but definitely suffering, Ben Perkins. Did they survive the war?
I would like to be heard, so I should probably unmute myself. Oh man, so Spalding, it's funny. I actually haven't given a lot of thought to what comes after, um, as far as the longer term, right? There were some things that would have happened over the next few months that I was thinking about, but um, as far as I'd like to think that perhaps he made it, that Spalding made it. I think that the funny thing is I'm the only character that never actually got hit during this whole thing somehow. People attacked me, but I didn't get hit, so that was very good.
Because you rolled really, really high on your awareness checks, and every time somebody went to stab you in the back, you heard it.
One of the few things that I put points in was awareness. But don't ask him to fire a gun because he can't. He had a 1 in that. But yeah, it's like I figure that that Spalding and Eleanor sort of went on continuing to do what they did. There was someone in the chat at some point compared them to like Steed and Emma Peel at some point, something weird like that. But it's basically I like to imagine that they had an entire series of novels happen to them after the after the war, where they continued working with whatever form British intelligence takes in that era. At that point, as things progress, Perkins, it's rough. He's a private, so he's by and large cannon fodder. I know that Trooper would probably embrace the idea that Perkins gets tragically cut down after, just before being able to finally make it to some dinner or other. But he's not here, so I'm going to instead say that I think Perkins probably. I would like to think Perkins makes it in some fashion. I think probably something happens that changes him in some way because he's very young. He was at various times 17, at various times 15, depending on what we said that day. But I think that he probably, there was a thing actually where that his death, or not his course was kind of affected to a certain extent by Griffith's death, because Perkins, just in my head canon, was starting to learn about this world of working outside the rules within the military, and he was interested in that because it was interesting and forbidden, and it's like he had sort of drilled into him, keep your place. He was very big on just sort of the moral rightness of England's authority, that kind of deal. But at the same time, he still had this sort of class warfare thing going on in his head that he had to reconcile. So I kind of like to imagine that he doesn't figure that aspect of himself out until later. Maybe at some point, just maybe, he does well enough to get some kind of promotion that he ends up, like it's the end of the war, so he ends up turning down and going in another direction. What direction, I can't say. But he did had some very interesting, it turns out he had some interesting survival skills. Brawling and sleight of hand and things of that nature. So maybe he finally he ends up for a while being stepping into the role of O'Malley, because we found out he was the bookie for everyone. So maybe he actually steps up and does that for a while. and so that would be cool, I think.
So, of the other noted individuals, Prax, who, if any, make it out alive?
So I will say right now, Major Atkins will survive at least until Waterloo. Whether he survives Waterloo or not would be a question. Major Holmes billets out before Waterloo and remains in Spain with his very good friend Francisco. Yes, they were sleeping together.
We know it was subtext. I mean, it was like glowing subtext, but we know.
Yes, but some people want it stated. There, I've stated it. I want to make sure I have people that would be important to know. Oh, we forgot. We'll have to ask Alyssa about particular NPC, though. The other important personage that people would care to know about is Colonel Fisher. Colonel Bartholomew Fisher. He does survive the war. His name isn't Colonel Bartholomew Fisher, however. His name is Frederick. As in, his father, Frederick, Duke of York, second son of George III. And he gets recalled to England.
Well, there you go, folks.
Yeah, we had a spare royal sitting around.
That leads me to my next bit, because, again, with wars come war stories.
Oh,
So,
Coldrake does ask, what about the guest appearing French officer of the Allies, Major de Laurent? Simon's not here, so I'm going to say that Major de Laurent survives long enough to go back to France. What happens after the war in France, or Napoleon's deposition onto Elba, excuse me.
fair.
Can I reveal also a very tiny plan that I had that we will
by all
never know
means.
whether or not it happens, because it actually involves an NPC, the NPC that Trooper was playing. It's Priscilla Quibble. I had an idea, and it's really up to Trooper whether or not I think probably whether or not she would go for this. But Spaulding was planning at some point to talk to Major Atkins to see if perhaps there could be some leniency thrown her way if she did some intelligence work for King and Country.
But really, is Miss Quibble worthy of leniency?
Well,
at
it's
all?
a question of finding out, really.
It also is also a question of what has she actually done.
Yeah.
She is
that's
innocent,
the thing.
technically.
She didn't do anything wrong. She just, she had a very specific idea of how she wanted things done, and the way things looked out. So I felt that Cleveland's death was kind of really dark humor, in that she ended up getting what she really wanted in the end, without having to really do a whole lot.
But we have one other NPC that we need to know whether they survived or not. Hey, Alyssa.
Yeah.
Oh, Anushka 100% survives. Oh, absolutely. There's no way she doesn't. I imagine she eventually tells Lieutenant Valentine that she would like to maybe not follow the regiment around with a little more stability, and perhaps offers to take the kids somewhere to give them like a more stable home life and environment because they're young, so it's probably fine for that moment, and goes back to being an incredibly talented weaver, just doing all the good things and probably doing everything she can to very subtly tell Lieutenant Valentine, like, what if you were done with army and found other job instead?
Nice. But that leads me into the question. The story is told by the survivors. So of those that lived, what, if anything, do they write or tell others of their time during the war, especially around the incidents that we saw in the campaign?
So I think Colonel Fisher would probably note or write about Valentine in his memoirs. Just the little incidents, like the way they sort of just intersected, particularly at the end there when Valentine actually threatened the life of Colonel Fisher, and Colonel Fisher being the amused older gentleman who didn't really care so much about rules and such, kind of didn't take it personally. It would sort of be like those memes or cartoon videos where you see this little guy trying to attack this bigger guy, but the bigger guy is just has his hand out on the forehead of the little guy, and the little guy just doesn't arms are just too short to box with God. So I felt like that's Colonel Fisher's view of Valentine, but he kind of respected that spark, I guess, that happened there at the end, even if it was misguided.
Jim, does Spaulding write a memoir?
So yeah, I think that he does, but it's he writes it under a pen name, and he writes it as a series of romance novels.
Fair.
And it's not actually, and it's obscured so that the names are all changed, and it's actually it's referring to a different war or something like that. So it's all because he never tells anyone directly what's going on because it's classified, but he will. But he does kind of, I think maybe in later years we'll just start penning these racy novels just to just out of boredom.
Wow. Okay. And finally, does Lady Valentine write, or if not write, what stories does she tell her kids?
I imagine Anushka is not the kind of person to mince her words, and she's not somebody that's going to be like flowery and like write a book about it. I imagine that when she does talk to the kids about it, she's like, there was a point in time where we lived in Spain. All of these things happened. Your dad got injured a lot. He was a strong man, but not necessarily a socially smart man. This is why it's important that I teach you all some good graces so you can get by. But I imagine that she doesn't, probably not unlike my grandfather would tell his POW stories. She never goes into very much detail, and never like even if you poke her about it, she's like, you don't need to know the gory details. In fact, I don't know the gory details, so we're just gonna not.
Fair.
Like, it's not lying, it's more there's nothing to say on her half.
Now to pull the handbrake and make a K turn. Let's go into the delightfulness that was brought up earlier of props and costumes. So we know the inciting incident of our absent fop, High Trooper, kicking things off. But it seems like everyone just sort of kind of like started going in, and as someone who likes having an excuse to dress up himself, how did that all come about? And the other question that is always on my mind is, what you're gonna do with the stuff now? Now the show's over. Like, is this a piece that just hides in the closet, or are we going to see those again?
So I'll pull this first. I actually have a piece. I can actually go get it. Give me 2 seconds. I have to go get it.
I want to see what this is.
I'm very curious.
There's all this curiosity.
I did actually wear a full, a military cut jacket that's a little bit quasi redesigned because fashion is a thing. But when it actually is, I do wear it pretty regularly. I have a very nice little black dress that I wear under it if I want to look like professional but like still funky. And you may have actually seen me in that outfit if you went to PAX East this year, because I wore that for to moderate a panel. And I'm like, ooh, wait, I have a military jacket. I don't have to go buy one. So that's what I did. But yeah, that will probably come out again. Almost everything I wear, if I buy costume pieces for a stream or a game, will come back again. Probably individual pieces will change. Different things will come back. The corset I bought for Ainfra, I will probably rework that into other things. I bought the dress for Lyneth, which, yeah, it was a great investment. I'm going to keep wearing that whenever I want to. It is fabulous and it works. But like, I'll rework these into other things. I bought like pirate pieces for a pirate costume when we did Black Flag on Simon's channel. It was it was most of those pieces were just like kind of generic pieces, but all the jewelry I already had. So if you can't tell, I was kind of a 90s punk goth kid. It means that a lot of this shit is not going away. And then, so my mother's father, my Grandpa Giuseppe, his first job, and really his only job, except for a brief period from 1943 to 1944, was as working in Bridgeport, Connecticut, for a local department store called Skydell's. He started as a kid emptying the garbage cans every night, and when they finally retired as the manager of the men's department. And the only reason he stopped working is because they closed the door of the store, right? He was one of those guys. But because of that, we had all of these pieces, or there'd be things that would get from the store that wouldn't sell, or they'd get extra gifts or something. So costume jewelry, we have massive amounts of, and we don't get rid of because it's oh wait, this could be work really great for a character or for something. So that just kind of some of them, there's some very interesting 1960s overly costume jewelry that's sitting in a corner being not yet, but soon it will be appropriate for a character. It always comes back.
So Alyssa, any history or usage or dedication to pieces used?
So the coat I found that at a thrift store for $3. like forever ago, like long before I started even being part of any stream game, because I wanted that style coat. It's not particularly warm. It's not particularly like I think because it was $3, and if I had the ability or knew somebody, like I would probably tailor it a little different so it would actually like fit me better. But I used it for Black Flag, and it was just like, it is as close as I am going to get without spending money on a new thing right now. So I went with it. And when when Trooper invoked the shawl as a character costume change rule, I considered also following him in the shawl thing, because I always have like a blanket scarf nearby. Currently, I have this one that looks like the magic carpet from Aladdin, or a blanket or something, because I am always cold, like without a doubt. But instead, I went with the let's take the coat off option. The coat definitely will make an appearance. It's fun just to have when eventually the world opens up again and I can wear fun things like my good friends and I have this whole thing where it's like, one day what we're going to do is have a party where we wear just the most ridiculous fancy outfits and go to Olive Garden or stay home and do nothing, just as an excuse to dress up and be fancy for all the times we didn't get to do that this year. That coat will definitely make an appearance. I definitely enjoy keeping the costumes around. It is fun to do the costume changes, even though it was very hard to like float out of the jacket for between characters.
So, Jim, who now has pieces and went down the fashion rabbit hole. What is going to become of those pieces, and will we see them again?
Have you a moment, because there are a few items I should probably parade us through if we've time. I shall start with Rejected, shall I?
Yes.
There were a couple of cravats that I went through that just simply weren't quite what we wanted for the piece. So twas unfortunately, this sadly was a bit late to the era. This is a cravat of I believe the clipped variety. That I got this one from Historical Emporium a while back, and I got it for actually for an 1800s era, late 1800s era game that I played on Off the Table with Urban Shadows. We did we were in the sort of the 1890s. And I was playing basically someone who owned an establishment, an establishment. Basically, a demon servant who owned a sort of a brothel, a combination brothel and a gambling hall and a dance hall and stuff. And this ended up seeing use again. I've used it more than once. I used it for a game of Baron Munchausen we played at some point. The three of us here on this call played once. But sadly, this I felt wouldn't work. I ordered a cravat. I ordered a couple of cravats. There was this one that ended up not just sort of clashing with everything else that I had, so I decided not to go with it. And then the one that I settled on, just the basic white, which is just, this is a strip of white cloth that I got that worked out just fine. And it was also long enough, thankfully, to tie, just barely, and do the wraparound front to back thing. And I would sit down and I watched that. I watched this video and tried to. It took me like 20 tries, and I finally got a thing that worked where you have to pull it through. This strange sort of backwards forwards thing you have to pull in two different directions at once to get it closed. And also, I had to go back several times, or I didn't have to, but I felt the desperate need to go back and watch that scene from the Scarlet Pimpernel. Where he talks about Chauvelin's cravat, and I managed to work some of the dialogue into Spaulding's dialogue as well when we did our shopping scene. But that was a lot of fun. So hopefully, yeah, definitely, if I ever get to play a character who has a cravat again, I'm hopefully going to use this again. The shirt, which was all I had at first. Well, no, not all I had, but it was the first item that arrived, sort of the frilly shirt. the John Pertwee shirt, as some of us in my head are calling it, is sort of the it's an Amazon thing. It's very much a modern sort of costume piece thing with hooks and what have you. So it's not really it is not era appropriate per se, but it's enough to fake it. The main thing I wanted it for were the cuffs, which were this delightful sort of this delightful Beatles album of a shirt cuff. I hope one day, once again, that I actually, oddly enough, had thoughts about a strange 70s character that this would work for, and I have no idea if it's going to show up in a stream or not, but the idea is circling around in the head, so it'll probably get spat out sooner or later. So hopefully this will come into use again. I also, the other new thing that I ordered was this, it's very cheap actually, but it was after I saw Trooper's jacket, I wanted one. And I ended up getting this very generic, also Sergeant Pepperish looking thing. It actually doesn't close. It's a very cheap thing I ordered off of some website or other. That I decided would work best for the Perkins transformation. And originally I was thinking about using it for Spaulding's military coat, and I decided, you know what? No, he has so much disrespect for actually how the military runs in some ways that he he's going to go around, especially when he's operating. He's just going to be in shirt sleeves most of the time, which is why I settled on just the vest. So this, I don't know if this is going to show up again or not. I hope it does, but it would need an excuse. But that's part of the reason why I got it. I tried to go for a look that wasn't necessarily accurate, but generic, kind of a sort of a more generic look that could be taken for a number of different eras, or things that are sort of would hint at Napoleonic, but also could hint at one or two other weird things. And so I think I'm going to find it useful later. A lot of times when I pick up a costume piece, I always think, how reusable is this? And so, like, could I fit it to other things? And that's one of the things I did with this. So the vest, I have all of them here. The vest I also got from Historical Emporium a while back. I already had this. This was Frontier Classics. This vest was what I used. This was my Marshallin vest that I got I picked it up for the Deadlands campaign that I ran on Tales from the Grim. Along with, I got a shirt and a cowboy hat and stuff like that for it. And but turns out, 1800s vest, generic enough looking. I went ahead and was able to make use of it for also that Baron Munchausen game we did, and then again for this, because it's like you need some kind of vest, and this was neutral enough color. I think it would work out, because everything else was going to be odd. This coat, which I brought out, the green velvet coat, which I grabbed for the soiree, is actually a piece I've had since the late 90s. I have been a theater person for some time. I have been afflicted with theater. So I picked this up at a store, and I lived in Myrtle Beach at the time. Hold on.
This is a prerequisite. So is being afflicted like with theater being afflicted with syphilis?
It is probably less curable. I can imagine.
Sorry.
Also, you don't get it through a computer virus. But but yes, it is the gift that keeps on giving it away. But yes, I got this coat at a little place called The Venue. It's actually the place that the lip service, the place that created it, still exists. I think they're out in California. They don't make this exact type of thing anymore. They've gone, I think, we looked at the website, I think they've gone slightly more sort of weird punk goth thing, or not post punk goth thing. It's more sort of
leather goth kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was like really plasticky and just
Yeah.
none of us kind of vibe with that.
The I had this coat for quite a while. I picked it up just as I recall, just as a way to have a weird coat. I've used it at LARPs, basically, and it was, of course, it was the color. It's the John Pertwee influence. I was a fan of old school Doctor Who, and so this is kind of that too, was sort of in there in my brain. Oddly enough, the piece that I picked up, most of the ones that I got new were fairly cheap. The most expensive one I got, which wasn't still all that expensive, was this. I had to actually do some research first to figure out what this was called. And unfortunately, with the way my brain works, I'm struggling to grab the word again. But it's I know what this is called, but unfortunately, it's not coming to mind immediately.
I only have the generic term of glass.
Yeah, it took me a few leaps down a few different things to get it. I actually said it on the cast anyway. But yeah, it's one of them things. But I ordered it from I ordered it from just a 3D printing place. This is plastic, but they spray painted the gold color on it. And it's a quizzing glass is what it's called. There we go. The boggle pieces lined up finally. So once I finally, after like an hour of searching the web and found the term quizzing glass, because I wanted one of these again, because Scarlet Pimpernel. They're very difficult to get a hold of because, again, not a lot of people know what they are. But you can be just delightfully aristocratic and and mean to people with this. So basically, I ordered it. You'll notice there is no actual glass inside. This is totally fake. But it would work well enough as a prop, and it was really the spray paint that cost the most on it. This was like $30 basically to get the whole thing, and I was like, I've wanted one of these for many years since seeing the original Scarlet Pimpernel, and I was like, why not get one for this occasion, because when else will I have the opportunity? I fear this will probably never make another appearance, because when and how, but you never know.
Challenge accepted.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, we should bring it back. But I just got curious for my own things to find one on Etsy, and I found one that's 18K gold. It's an antique. It's $800. I do not have $800 to buy a quizzing glass like that.
Yeah,
Authentic
ones are.
The search continues for one that is in a more affordable price range for no other reason than I would love to just get on a work call and just hold it up randomly for no reason and never explain it.
Incredibly haughty with one. It's amazing.
I think I need to do this. Anyway.
Pictures or it didn't happen.
Indeed.
That's everything in my scandal wardrobe at present.
Scandal wardrobe. Which actually brings me to the scandal alcove became a thing with the show. How did that really come about, and why did we always go back to the well on Scandal Cove?
I can tell you in the coming about, I just blurted it out. I actually did not know I was going to say it until I was saying it.
Part of it came out of because somebody made it. There was the rumor that the Doctor was seeing this woman, that he was involved in these affairs, and when we were talking about this and I was describing the setting, is like, well, you would have had the main the main tent, the main ward tent, and then you would have had like this slightly curtained off section that would have been the Doctor's quarters / general, because he would have his general, all of the heavy stuff that he would have kept would have been there. You would have had nurses, and you would have had barbers, particularly. But surgeons were a rarity, and if you had one per regiment, you were really lucky. And mostly they were limited to the use for officers. They weren't going to be used for most of the enlisted. Most of those guys were... There was usually at least one person in a unit, maybe every couple units, who had some, like, folk remedy level of healing. And access to things like maggots. But, like, a true surgeon was a rarity. And this is where I go back to... Yes, Prax actually really is interested in the Napoleonic Wars and spends a lot of time reading books about them, because on one hand you have the Richard Sharp series, and on the other hand there's this other pile of books which are wonderfully historically accurate, can drive you down major rabbit holes of research at 3 o'clock in the morning, and have a decent movie that I wish had a sequel. They're Patrick O'Brien's... The first book is Master and Commander, and then the second book is Far Side of the World. The character of the surgeon in that series, who is actually really interesting because he's like trained. He's actually is a spy for the British. Spoiler alert for the whole book series that's been out for 30 years at this point. He is a spy for the British government, and that's why he's on this ship. Because he's supposed to be stationed with this officer to try, he and the captain are best friends, but he is actually a spy for the British government and doing all of this behind the scenes things, and he is a rarity because he had actually been sent to Spain and studied at the University of Salamanca, and is a true surgeon, which was an extreme rarity for a ship, let alone a regiment of this size. And you had, your most... ships and most regiments would be lucky if they had like a barber who could do like basic amputation, removing of things, and possibly stitching you up and hoping you didn't die of gangrene. A surgeon of Dr. Spaulding's quality, the regiment was blessed with his presence. So he would have had his own kind of like sleeping quarters, kind of attached, but this is where it tied into the rumors that Dr. Spaulding was seeing someone. So there were rumors of scandal in the alcove, in his alcove. Particularly the scandal of, well, everyone saw a woman leaving his quarters early in the morning. Who happened to be his wife. But nobody knew that.
One
so
hysterical thing. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's how the scandal alcove got its name.
There's just this one hysterical thing is that Spaulding was going to have all these rumors about him sleeping around and no one knew his like distance from his wife, and that it seemed like he was flirting with everybody, but actually he was just completely faithful the whole time.
But it meant that there was like a location that they could go and talk and be quasi-secretive until I blew it up.
Yeah. Until it met with a vigorous reaction. But now, as we come to this part of the evening, will we see a return to the Napoleonic Wars? I must ask.
I never say no. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because this is not... This, or Vampire, or even technically the Call of Cthulhu game that we ran, they exist in a world and the story exists. The world... There might be other stories. It's not like D&D. The campaign's done, everything's done, you've achieved goal, yay, won, heroes, go home. These are snapshots of lives in these characters. They could come back. I'm going to tell you right now that it will not be next season because other things are happening and scheduling is complicated, but I'm not going to say no. Excellent. And then I defer to players to say other things. Except for Bisley, who's dead.
I mean, It's not like we wouldn't want to come back to the life. This is such a fun world to play in. So if there was an opportunity to come back, like I know Bisley's died, but we could retcon that. I would retcon that to come back.
Yeah,
he could die in Waterloo for all we know. He just dies sometime.
Yeah, he dies sometime in the war. He doesn't survive the war, so we just need to, you know.
Yeah,
whatever.
we could just punt time forward a little bit. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyone else wish to talk about their time and maybe returning to the war?
Jim, that face, it's so good.
No. It's a good question, right? Because I'm sort of torn in some ways, because I like it when we get to a decent sort of end and we have closure, which we have. And so I'd be perfectly fine if this is it. I'd be like overjoyed. Obviously, you know, if Prax said let's do another one, I'd be saying, yeah, sure, absolutely. I'd be very happy to do that if that came up. If someone if someone for some strange reason wanted me to if Prax or something somewhere down the line wants me to NPC Spalding in like another thing or something, I'd do that. I'd very happily if we wanted to mix it up, to mix and match with other things. So I mean that would be cool.
Lily Tomlin.
So I mean I'd be happy with any of that.
And Dolly Parton.
What was new to you about
I don't feel as though I absolutely need it. I don't need it in the medical sense, as it were. So I mean, it's like I'd be good if we if this was it, but at the same time, I'd be overjoyed to keep going. You know, I'm pretty open on it.
For me, I feel like, you know, a good story always has the beginning, middle, and end. And I felt like, well, Cleveland certainly had his end, and Pomeroy. Now that we know that Bisley is going to meet an untimely end, Pomeroy, well, he's going to be saddled with a lot of grief there. So I don't know how much longer that he'd last. I didn't know who else was going to be in this campaign when Prax asked me if I wanted to join it, but basically I'll accept anything that Prax asks me to do. I think that it's pretty obvious, given that, you know, my subscription here is tier 3, and I'm the one responsible for building Prax's computer so that she could actually do everything that she's done this year. So yeah, so I'm like sitting in the green room, just, you know, kind of waiting for the next thing. So, you know, like between, you know, Prax and Jim and Origami Shuriken, who's in chat, and Simon, and you know, Pope, and now Alyssa, I would play anything, anytime with these folks. So, you know, that's kind of my philosophy about it. I'll try anything. You know, I knew going in that this was probably going to be a very challenging one for me, because for those of you who don't know my history, European history did not really factor a whole lot in my academic career at all. Most of my background has been in surprise Asian history, and in particular, the history of martial arts and its development, that sort of thing. So, you know, I did this more as a way to sort of challenge myself and, you know, continue working on improvisational skills. But, you know, for me personally, when I'm approaching tabletop role-playing games, I'm trying to approach it in the same way that I approach my my real-life job in accounting, which is to do so ethically and professionally. And you know, I'm kind of mad at myself that I didn't really do that in prepping for this game as much as I probably should have, especially after, you know, session 0, or after getting pulled into that channel and seeing that Trooper and Jim were also there. And after having sat through a lot of 4 or 5 hour conversations between just Prax and Trooper, both on their stream and in Zoom.
Yeah, the legendary Trooper goes and like Prax is just paddling the boat as they go upstream.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. They don't know what I was doing most of the time when they were chatting. I was actually doing accounting work while they were going on, because I didn't have anything to contribute whatsoever to those conversations.
Yeah, we're sorry, Anino. We thank you for being here. And by that I don't mean that way. I mean, thank you for putting up with Trooper and I. Okay, so full disclosure. Spoiler alert for anyone in Trooper's Discord who maybe yells at him to go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning or after 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday nights. If he was staying up beyond that, it was because literally we were going on some kind of tangent and had fallen down, the two of us going off of each other. And then Anino was there and we were like talking and then Anino would become conversation. And then at some point Anino would leave. And we would always say, oh, this is the point at which we should go to bed because now the adult has left and we are no longer supervised. Yeah, that never happened.
Yeah, so I didn't just vanish, by the way. I would just type in chat. I'm like, don't want to interrupt your conversation, but I'm going to go. So
and we would usually say, oh, wait, goodbye. And already.
I don't really need to ask any more questions. My work here is done, but with that one, I can't top that, but I'm going to ask more questions.
There comes a point at when it gets to midnight and it's I'm an old man, I feel the need to go to bed. I really enjoy these conversations and participating in them. They're awesome. But at the same time, there comes a point where, I just start to do something incredibly strange. I think last time I just started getting closer and closer to the camera until they noticed I was getting closer to the camera. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I've got to go to bed. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Fantastic. Getting flashbacks to Don't Rest Your Head, but fantastic.
I know, right?
But speaking of other projects, I really want to know where can we all see you next? I know we'll do outro plugs, but is there any projects up and coming that you can actually discuss where we can see you all next?
Well, I'll take this one first because there are two things, or there's one thing that's definitely I can talk about now. There will be other little things that will be happening. Yes, you will be seeing Anino back here on this channel to do cool things. Thank you again for building this wonderful rig because it does make my life infinitely better. Unfortunately, you won't see Anino in the next campaign we're doing, and that's purely because I ran out of room. I can do a lot, but when I hit 7 players, even I gotta go, no, wait, I'm done.
Oh Lord, what are we getting into?
I have concerns.
And so I was like, I can't ask any more people.
Well,
but you will be seeing Anino back. There will be a couple of one-shots that we're going to do, and I'm going to beg Anino to come play with us because, hi Anino, you want to come play with us? By the way, get Anino into your games. He plays cool things. He is a fabulous role player, and he's a great friend, as everyone on this table can confirm. But the next thing.
Still, I want to interrupt just to plug Anino.
Go.
If you haven't seen him in this and the awesomeness of this, go and check out Cyberpunk Red over on Wandering DM and see what this amazing man has done with the Rocker Boy in that system, taking it in a direction I would have never thought myself and making it such a part of that world and such a part of that group's story. It is mesmerizing. Get this man in more games. Continue.
tag onto that, go read the flash fic for that Cyberpunk Red game for everything that is going on, interesting things for X and Jimenez, and really great flash fic. But the next thing you will see in the new year is I will be running a game of Blue Rose on this channel. For those of you who don't know, hi, I'm diving back into more Green Ronin stuff. It's fun things. It's a romance fantasy RPG based on the age system. Couple things, spoilers to give out. One, romance can be both platonic and but the relationships between the characters are vitally important to that system. So we're going to have a very complex session 0 where we build the characters together so that I can make sure that I have my template for my relationship map all set and ready to go to track all of that. And because it's me and I kind of like to do that little bit of interesting things, hey y'all, there are corruption mechanics in Blue Rose. And I have friends who are really, really good at the techie stuff. So I am prepared for when corruption mechanics happen to affect the overlay.
Well, that is exciting and terrifying. Alyssa, where can we see you?
Probably live panicking on camera during Blue Rose as the corruption mechanic changes come out. That's where I'll be next. Yeah, that is all for me. I will play in just about anything any of y'all on this entire thing, Trooper included, ask me to do. Like, anytime Prax is like, I want to do a thing, it's like, cool. I don't need an explanation. Just sign me up. But that's about it.
All right, Jim, what you got cooking?
Perhaps I should unmute before I say. So yeah, there are a few things that I can't talk about yet, just mostly because I don't have the dates nailed down. And so it's kind of vague, and I need to make sure that in talk that I have the conversation with everybody is are we ready? The are we ready stuff has to happen. But there are one or two. Okay. So I had some medical stuff happen this year, and I am still slowly recovering from all of it. So I'm trying to ramp back up to doing a number of things. I am not aiming to stream professionally per se. This is still just my therapy in some ways, but it's also but it's a thing that I enjoy doing and I want to keep doing. So, and and being on other people's stuff, sure, absolutely. What I'm doing right now, we've got a dark matter campaign going on my channel, channel Otherdoc, OTHERDOC, and that Anino is in. If you would like to see the glory that is Rek Mara, he is playing a bird person, basically, who appears to be spiraling into corruption of some kind, at least to all outside appearances. We're not sure what's happening with him.
The void is not corruption; it's just entropy, says the void cleric.
Yeah. So background: my character Rekmara is actually a druid of the obelisk. So picture a bird version of Mr. Sinister. But yeah, that's kind of where he is at the moment. He actually has 2 pieces of the obelisk in his possession and had fused them together. So not only does he have power over animals, but now he has power over machines. He I wouldn't say he's evil, but he has particular views about nature and power.
We are concerned.
I see the Pope concerned face.
You can thank Prax for that, because I was already thinking like going Avia Ra, and then when she told me about her character, then I'm like, oh yeah, this guy would never follow the sun. Not at all. Not at all.
Delightful.
Yeah.
Anything else that we can see you in, Anito?
So Jim talked about Dark Matter. That's our final arc, I think, that we're doing before we need to sit down and reevaluate what we want to do next. And Prax mentioned Cyberpunk Red. So we're on a hiatus there. I'm also in a Scion game that's currently hosted on the Level Up TTV channel, but that game is also on hiatus. So apart from those 3 campaigns, I don't have anything nailed down at all during the new year.
Cool.
So.
New year, new digs, new times. And hopefully a better year than this one. And on that note, let me grab these last 2 questions from our friend Coldrake before we wrap up for the night. So, first question, Prax, if you were to set up another arc, but maybe having a different group of players, would you be interested in doing the French army before Waterloo?
I mean, it'd be a very different game, and with a very different... I would have to... It would be very different mechanically as well, because the reason I could make Good Society work with Sword Chronicle for this particular game is the inherent stratification of the British army at this time. You had officers, and they were gentlemen 99.9% of the time. And you bought your commission, you were considered to be nobles were officers, the rank and file were not, mostly made up of people who were either convicted of petty crimes or took the shilling to get some sort of life outside of England or Ireland and Scotland. Actually, that was a big thing of where the Jacobite rebellion came from. If you actually look at the statistics, the majority of the British army is not actually English at this point. It's made up of a bunch of Irish and Scots. Because there is no life for them in either Ireland or Scotland. Just the English being assholes. But because of that, there's a very great stratification. That stratification doesn't really exist in the French army at the time. Because of the way Napoleon, because again, the revolution and then Napoleon's rise, most of the people who become really great, confidants of Napoleon are with him from the beginning. People forget that Napoleon started as an artillery sergeant. And he's technically not French, he's a Corsican. But he is, and so this stratification doesn't exist the same way. It'd be an interesting thing to do. I would probably have to change the mechanics a bit to do it right. Because you wouldn't need as many of the good society kind of things. The societal pressures wouldn't be there, but it could happen. I never rule anything out.
Excellent. And then Anito, last question. When did you get the idea that you needed to pull out that farrier axe?
I wanted to shoehorn that in because Cleveland didn't get to do anything remotely farrier that was impressive, but I think at that point he was pretty angry and kind of tired of everyone's bullshit. So I felt that he needed to use the tool of his office to make a pardon the pun, a point. And so that's where it came out. Regrettably, he did not part Mrs. Bisley with it, but you know.
I mean, she wasn't Mrs. Bisley. Although, interesting point. side note, Pope, I'm going to tack this on.
Go for it.
Her name was never Mrs. Bisley because they were never officially married. Because her name was not Mary Elizabeth, whatever her assumed maiden name was. Her name was Mary Charlotte Stewart. And I could get away with throwing in an extra Stewart because all I had to do was legitimize one, or excuse me, not legitimize, just keep alive one of Bonnie Prince Charlie's 7 illegitimate sons.
Fair enough.
That's all I had.
Charlie got around.
Yes.
And on that note of scandal, we come to a close. I want to thank all of you here. Trooper, if you're watching this, thank you so much for your contributions to this amazing story. As I want to thank all of you who are watching, whether it's live, VOD, YouTube, you're as much part of the story as we are. And thank you for coming in this evening and joining us for this round of questions, secrets, and revelations. And now I must, as this host, bid you adieu. If you're looking more for this ridiculous face, well, you get a really close opportunity if you're watching this live. Tomorrow night, the 20th, over on Colonomicon's channel, I will be appearing in Steel Nacht, along with someone else. A ghost story of the phantasmagorical, also a period piece. So if you want to check out something spooky for the holidays, come on by. But till next time, take care and tell good stories.
Thank you, Pope. Thank you for being here. We're going to go around, let everyone else say their goodbyes. I would also like to thank Pope for doing this wonderful idea, because when I started pitching the idea of the regiment, I was like, hey, Pope, you want to do a thing when this is done? Because I have ideas. And he was like, sure, why not? So great. I would also like to thank publicly on stream and to his wonderful, charming face, thank you, Pope. For those of you who don't know, earlier in the season, when lockdown began, and I had this brand new wonderful computer and I could have a lot of my friends, I did a thing called Classics on Twitch, where we did live dramatic readings. In fact, a bunch of people here were involved in that. Performances. And Pope provided wonderful dulcet tones for the introductions for a large number of those. They were wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate them. And now I thank you for being such a wonderful friend. Speaking of wonderful friends and people who are involved in Classics on Twitch, hey, Jim. That's you.
Oh. Well, thank you so much for doing this. This was awesome. It was really nice to be able to kind of have this sort of post-mortem on it, to be able to actually get out some of the stuff we weren't able to talk about completely, and it was most thorough, and I very much appreciate it. I'm going to miss this so much. Thank you all so much. This has been wonderful. I'm Jim. I am OtherDoc, OTHERDOC, on both Twitch and Twitter. And my website is jimmyesthatjim.com, where I do game signups and what have you. So the aforementioned Dark Matter campaign is on Sunday afternoons over on my channel. So we've got that going on. And aside from my occasional bout of video gamery, that'll be it for this year. But early next year, I am going to try to I am tenderly going to try, or gingerly going to try, to put my foot back into running games on streams. I am going to run Urban Shadows, and I'm going to do a short campaign of that in early 2021. Targeting late January, early February for starting. And I don't know who's going to be in it yet because signups are still currently open. I am doing open signups for folks. I'm still going to be open through Wednesday the 30th. So a week from Wednesday. So if anyone would like to play, I'm trying to get faces on there that one doesn't normally see. So feel free to dive in if you would like. And that's right now. There's there's a significant number of folks signing up, but don't let that deter you, because I'm going to go through and look at each one and figure it out. But I definitely want to get that going. It's a game that's very near and dear to my heart. I have never run it. I'm going to give it a try. It's modern urban fantasy. All I have planned right now is a modern urban fantasy in a large city. And we'll figure out the details as we get there. There shall be world building involved, which I always do as sort of a communal thing. So for folks who want to do that, you can find the link in my Twitter. I usually tweet it out fairly regularly, or you can go to jimyesthatjim.com and click on game sign up, and you'll find the sign up link there as well. So would very much appreciate anyone who wishes to dive in on that. And if in the meantime, thank you all so much. I very much appreciate it. I appreciate being invited to this grand event, and I shall always treasure it. Take care, folks.
Thank you for coming, Jim. Thank you for choosing to join me on this crazy, crazy endeavor. Fun thing. I feel that I must speak for all of us in the audience when Jim says he's doing Urban Shadows and ask, hey, Jim, is the shirt coming out of the closet?
I don't have any plans for that guy to reprise that role right now, because he kind of has his own thing going on. And it's a question. He was resurrected not too long ago. Well, it's a while ago, but we shall have to. I don't know exactly what his disposition would be. He may or may not make an appearance. I don't know. I have to decide if that's the kind of thing that that I'm willing to put to put him in as an NPC or not. It's complicated up here.
That's fair. That's fair.
I don't know if I don't know. I feel like there are one or two things I need to figure out before I know if I want to try and do that. But I did enjoy playing him. I'm talking about Frank, by the way. I'm just not going to dance around. The character's name was Frank. He was another army doctor. I play a lot of doctors in in these games. It's a strange psychological thing. I don't know why. It's a strange psychological affectation I picked up at some point that I for some reason, like at least 1/3 to 1/2 of my characters end up being doctors of some kind or another. But yeah, that was one who was a burned out ex-army doctor who was very much into learning about the supernatural, and was always paying a terrible price for it.
Very much so.
And but it's the world you're living in, man. You got to do something. So that's a guy from Brooklyn. But we'll see if he ever makes an appearance again. I do not presently know, but I still have the shirt. So we shall see.
On that wonderful note, hey, Anino.
How's it going, everyone? You can find me on Twitter at Anino Gaming. All of my appearances have been discussed. Yeah, I enjoyed the company of everybody on this campaign. It was very much a learning experience for me. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't know what else I was supposed to add here.
Nothing. We just want to say thank you again because you're a wonderful person, and I really appreciate you coming and playing in this wonderful, crazy shenaniganry that I literally pulled out of my brain. So thank you. Appreciates you. Speaking of, hey, Lissa.
Yeah, speaking of shenanigans, I believe we already talked about Blue Rose, and so that's it for me. But you can find me on Twitter at Sandra Slamilton. That's about it. I guess I have loved every second of this. I love playing in every single one of Praxis games have been an adventure in their own different ways, and they're so much fun. And each cast has been independently wonderful and exciting to be around, but like I small part of my heart has an extreme bias for this group because it has been just the most fun. It has been a terrible year. Like, I know everybody's had a terrible year, but it has been an extremely rough year for me. And I have appreciated knowing that every week there is one group of people that I could rely on to indulge in this wild game. And it's been so great. And seriously, if there is ever a time that I would encourage everybody to follow and appreciate all of these people, it would be every single moment of every day ever, and also this moment right now. So thank you, all of you, for allowing me to join you on this craziness, and for playing with me and being the one of the many bright spots that I needed to get through all of this. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and again, thank you all for coming and playing. Thank you, Pope, for hosting this wonderful thing. I will post more things about what Blue Rose will be in the coming weeks. We probably in the middle of June, not June, January. Middle of January is when we're going to start. I will probably be doing a couple independent Prax talks to herself streams and in between, now that we are in break and have survived the first semester of law school. Yay. So I will have a couple of those probably during the holiday break. You should check my Twitter, because I post where I'm going to be, all the wonderful fun things I do, all the wonderful fun people like these fine, fabulous folks that I get to hang out with. We also do have the YouTube. The VOD will be up on YouTube again, along with all of the VODs of everything. I think there's only two classics on Twitch that didn't make the VOD, unfortunately, because of just the way things worked. They didn't save, right? Sorry, technical experience and learning. But next will be, I will see you for the romance of the Blue Rose. And, well, I should leave you with a little hint. Like a small hint. Small little taste. One of the things I do in every game I DM, for every game that I run, I create a playlist on Spotify that I then share with my players. This is the playlist that I use for DM prep, or just character creation, or just literally will have it playing all day, the day of the game, as I'm getting ready. So for those wondering, this was the character playlist, or this was the DM playlist for the Regiment. Some really nice kind of musical tones in there, some folk music. Yes, the Richard Sharp theme, the Sharp TV series theme was in there, because Over the Hills and Gone Away is actually a folk song. But that was the last one. It's time for me to start changing my gears and getting ready. This is the Romance of the Blue Rose playlist that, yes, I have shared with all of my players, so they can get an idea of where things might go. And on that, thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being here for this wonderful story that we've told. Thank you for all of the bits, follows, subscriptions, donations, all of the wonderful things that you all have done to make this a great story for us all. And I look forward to seeing you after the holiday with all of the fun new stories that we will tell together in the new year. Until next time, friends, I will see you again.